Joining me right now with a look at the future of energy, which is so critical in light of everything that's happening from a technological standpoint, right, is my friend Ed Kovalik. He's the CEO of Prairie Operating Group. Ed, first of all, welcome back to the program. It's good to see you.
Hey, it's great to be with you again, Trish.
I've been thinking about you, and I've been thinking a lot about energy, only in light of what we saw, say, out of Nvidia this week, and everybody's so focused on AI and the chip sector, et cetera. Donald Trump clearly is too, right? Taking an ownership position for the U.S. government and Intel. As we think about what's going on with the AI push, which is critical, and the tech push and the semiconductor, et cetera, what about energy? Like, how does energy fit into all this? Because I would imagine it takes a lot of energy, when all those GPUs go crunching, et cetera. How does energy fit in?
Well, you're absolutely right to think about energy. So, everyone's focused on AI for what I believe are all the right reasons. But I don't think that everyone is aware of just how great of a power hog AI data centers are. So, take for instance, where I live in Austin, my community is maybe about 100 homes. And so the amount of power that AI uses to train just one model is the amount of power that my community of 100 homes would use in a year. So it's just sucking up every available electron to train those models everywhere they're building data centers. And it's anticipated that data center growth to feed the AI revolution is going to double between now and 2030. So this is really an acute problem.
Okay, so what that tells me, and because we don't want to ignore AI, and I know a lot of people are freaked out by it, but you know what? The ship has sailed, and I look at it like we want to own this space. We don't want China owning this space. But part of owning that space, I would imagine, then is also being ramped up and prepared from an energy standpoint.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, AI stands to possibly revolutionize our economy, hopefully in good ways. I know there's also a lot of fear around the possible and unpredictable, but we have to be ready with energy for that. And so all this talk about energy transition is really misinformation because we need every ounce of energy we can get. We really need energy addition and all forms of energy. And so today, for instance, our electricity grid is powered by about 60% fossil fuels, 20% nuclear, 20% everything else, which is solar, wind, biomass, hydropower. And those ratios really aren't changing over time. So more solar and wind aren't really going to account for more of the power generation. We really need nuclear en masse in this country, but I'm also a realist as much as I'm an optimist. And as much as the administration is working to roll out the red carpet from a regulatory perspective for nuclear, that's going to take the better part of the next 20 years, in my opinion. So in the
No,
interim,
you're right.
we're
I
going to
hear you,
need.
by the way, on nuclear. Funny side story. I was a judge in the Miss America pageant a few years ago, and the young woman who wound up winning was a nuclear engineer. And let's just say this
Sure.
judge had a little something to do with pushing that. She was also a great violinist and a beautiful, wonderful woman, very, very smart. But I was like, gosh, to talk about nuclear power in such a positive way was very refreshing to me. One of the reasons I like talking to you is because you are refreshing in that you're talking about fossil fuels in a whole new way. I mean, these are industries, right, that have gotten such bad reputations, whether it be nuclear, of course, whether it be fossil fuels, which we all well know. And there's been such a movement against these industries, fossil fuels in particular. And I think one of the things that you're highlighting is just reality, right, which is that the world is changing from a
Yeah.
technological standpoint, AI, et cetera. It's going to require a lot of energy. What do we have the ability to do right now, safely, productively, right here in the USA?
Look, I mean, I'm for energy abundance because what we know from looking back at history is that access to available and affordable and abundant energy leads to human prosperity and longevity. I don't know about you, I want to live longer. I think everybody wants to live longer. And so the idea that we should do away with any form of energy, especially the one that accounts for the greatest contribution of energy, in our electrical grid and is in everything we use in our daily lives and surrounds us, is really frightening and dangerous, because that would lead to scarcity of energy, which leads to hunger, starvation, and death. So I don't know about you, but those that trio doesn't sound appealing to me.
Yeah, it's funny. I was at a conference. I was interviewing Vivek Ramaswamy at something, a Bitcoin conference actually last fall in New York City. And it was not just a Bitcoin conference, it was actually a conference, you'll love this, between sort of, and not Bitcoin specifically, but cryptos and mining and energy companies. Right? Like they merged the two because the people that put this
Sure.
conference together, the bank, like they got it. And that was sort of the first, I was like, yeah, okay, like this makes sense. And again, it's continuing on with this theory that you're discussing. We've had a lot of activists on the green energy front, and I get it, but simultaneously, when I look at America and I look at the technological advances, I mean, you think about what you guys are trying to do at Prairie, you think about all the advances made within the ability to extract energy in innovative ways, right? Like really like in ways that you wouldn't have thought before. That seems safer to me than the coal plants in China.
Oh, 100%. Look, I mean, for one, uh, being a student of history, we built America on the back of coal. And so, as much as China is doing the same thing today and building coal plants faster than we can decommission ours, it's hard to blame them for doing that, because coal is abundant and expensive and, really perfect for scaling energy systems. But in the United States, I mean, one of our greatest attributes is innovation, and we've really applied innovation to oil and gas here in creating horizontal shale drilling and fracking. And when I bring people up to Colorado to see our operations, which are the cleanest operations anywhere in the world, we create the cleanest molecule of oil anywhere in the world. People are just stunned, and I invite you to come join us as well for a tour sometime, because
I should see
what
it.
we do looks like alchemy. We drill a mile down vertically, and then we drill out 2 or 3 miles horizontally, and we drill through rock that doesn't look like it has any oil in it. And we complete that, frack it, and up come hundreds of barrels of oil. So it shocks people to see, and they just can't put two and two together. But that's what makes this country great, is our innovative spirit.
Can I ask you from sort of a regulatory standpoint, like what you're feeling, what you're seeing right now as a CEO of a fracking company, like what's going on, like in the real world? Are you able to do what you need to do, or is there still red tape?
You know, um, we really haven't seen any changes in our operations. I think partly because Colorado is a state, and a lot of what governs our industry is state level rather than federal level.
Okay.
Colorado is already, so ahead of the rest of the country in terms of environmental regulations, both from our operations perspective and an emissions
Forgive me, do you
perspective.
mean from a good
Uh,
perspective or a bad perspective?
well, I mean, from a bad perspective in that there's more regulation, and
Uh
a
huh.
good perspective in that it's made us produce the cleanest molecule anywhere in the world. So
Okay.
we're very low in emissions, for example. We don't flare methane. We truck very little volumes of hydrocarbons. Most of what we produce is put in pipe. And so that's all good. I'm not sure the federal government could really affect that too much. The federal government has been more so, led by President Trump's rally cry to lower energy prices and drill baby drill. And while I love the concept of cheaper oil and gas on the one hand, on the other hand, it's actually frighteningly cheap already. So on an inflation adjusted basis, we're producing kind of $40 oil today, which is bottom of the basement. So I'm not really sure
Is that sort of
that
break
we'll
even?
see.
Sometimes they say there's like a point of no return, right? Especially given the heavy tech that's
Yeah.
going into what you guys are doing and the preservation of the environment, et cetera.
Well, break even prices in this country have crept up. They're kind of hovering around $50 to $60
Okay.
for the majority of inventory in this country. So, unless we want to destroy American energy and become dependent on foreign sources of energy, I don't really think we can stomach lower oil prices from here.
Okay, so there's like a couple things going on though. On the one hand, you need much more supply. On the other hand, more supply would theoretically bring oil prices down, and yet you've got this insatiable demand that's coming. I mean, I think it's going to be onslaught. Like, I just look at all the advances that we've seen, and you and I have talked about this before, and even robotics, right? Robotics is going to be a
Yeah.
big demand, suck up of energy, if you would. So all those things combined, it seems like we should be scaling up.
We should be, but it's harder done than said for a couple really major reasons. So in shale, which accounts for the majority of production in the United States for oil and gas, shale is the kind of asset where you've got a really drastic decline in production from a new well. So we produce 13 million barrels of oil in this country, per day. It's hard just to maintain that level of production because shale is just so hyperbolically declining. Now, in terms of the other form of energy production, conventional oil and gas discoveries, the problem there is that it's been massively underinvested in for the last decade, driven by this concept that, hell, we don't need any more oil and gas come 2030 because we're going to go green, whatever that means. And, ESG pressures in the public markets have pressured public companies to underinvest in conventional oil and gas discoveries. The problem there is that it takes a really long time to discover large new sources of oil and gas. And then it takes even greater amounts of money and time, typically about 7 to 10 years, to bring those new sources online. So we've got some challenges ahead.
You look at what we're doing and our challenges, compare and contrast that, if you would, for me, with China, because China doesn't, play by the same set of rules. They obviously also know that AI is going to be a huge driver of the new economy. They also know that they're going to need energy to power all this AI. How are they thinking about it in contrast to us?
Well, China's got a very interesting game plan. On the one hand, they are building coal plants as fast as they possibly can to fuel electricity generation in China because that's the most abundant and expensive way to do that. On the other hand, they're building, the majority of solar panels that they're exporting to the rest of the world uh, to be dependent on solar energy without, the rest of the world really knowing how we're going to generate power otherwise, because solar ain't going to cut it. But it just speaks to the fact that trying to unilaterally affect the Earth's climate through US and European policy is really a fool's errand because no matter what we do in the West, we're never going to catch up with what China is doing to counter our efforts in terms of, its buildup of coal.
So, where do you see us vis-a-vis them then? I mean, in this energy, I don't want to call it an energy war, but look, I mean, it's an AI war. I guess it's an energy war too. I mean, it's so be it, right? I mean, whoever dominates this sector, this growth in AI and tech and robotics, which needs energy, is going to dominate, in my view, the world economy.
Well, I think that what we have going for us, besides American ingenuity and innovation and being a capitalist country, which generates, the most efficient path towards, creating technology that works and scales, we also have abundant energy resources in this country, which China does not. So I think, we do have to unleash American energy. That means paving the way for nuclear to really get traction over the next 20 years. And in the meanwhile, really spending all of that green subsidy dollars that have been earmarked from taxes to make solar and wind economic, which otherwise they wouldn't be economic without government spending. If we can incentivize the oil and gas industry instead of demonizing the oil and gas industry to produce more gas in the US, which is really a transition fuel to nuclear to power AI data centers, I think that's what we can do.
It's,
If we
it's like
don't do
about being a
that,
realist, right? Like, you know,
100%,
the
100%.
idea that like somehow something can't succeed on its own, but you're going to keep feeding it subsidies, like to me, well, that's not capitalism, frankly. And I know you guys have written a lot. You've written a lot on this, and I encourage people to go over to oilfacts.com. I'm so happy to be in a partnership with you guys. We push it all the time. Every time I talk about oil, I'm like, go to oilfacts.com because you can learn more about really the truth. Because I think that there's been a narrative and it's been one-sided. And look, I have great appreciation, don't get me wrong, for our environment. I imagine you too, with all the time you spent in Colorado. I lived for a while in San Francisco and would go hiking in Marin County and all up and down the California coast. And I was like, wow, you know, like it's just beautiful. And I'm a big believer in preserving that beauty. But I'm also a realist and want to make sure that we're well positioned and our kids and our grandkids are all well positioned for the future. If you were to like look at, you know, all the things that you think about on a regular basis with your business at Prairie and sort of your sense of where the future is going, like what do you think the number one thing is that people need to come away with and just remember about the energy sector?
Well, we just need more energy. I think that's the key. We need energy addition in all forms. And, we're also, proud stewards of the environment. If you come out and see what we do and how we do it, we're surrounded by dairy farms. I think they emit more CO2 from their cattle than we do from our operations. So
I
we're
was just in
incredibly
Ireland
clean.
and I went to one little town one day and I was like, oh my gosh, it was the cows.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
could smell
For
them.
sure. So we need more energy because, we're on the team of human flourishing and human prosperity and longevity. We want everyone to be healthy and live longer and have access to energy. So I think that's the key message.
Without getting too scary, but you described a scenario to me off air, and I wonder if you would describe it for the viewers on air of if we don't do this, like what happens if we don't? Do we run a risk of rationing where, everything's going to go because the tech companies are paying for it and they need the AI and they need the energy and everyday folks wind up on the short end of that?
Well, scarcity always leads to rationing. And so, in a future where we've got scarcity of energy, but increasing demand, really driven by AI data centers, then, in a supply demand economic capitalist system, you're going to have data centers willing to pay more for that energy. And the rest of us are going to be stuck getting whatever the government's willing to give us at much higher prices because wherever the government's in control, prices rise. Look at California or which has 96% higher inflationary prices for energy than the rest of the country. We want to avoid that for the rest of the United States.
Agreed, agreed. All right. Well, people can learn more at oilfacts.com. They can check out your company, Prairie Operating Group. Ed, it's great to see you again, my friend. Thank you. Thank you for joining us with so much insight today.
Thanks for having me on. It's wonderful to see you as always.